Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Kingfisher Knits podcast. My name is Madeleine and I'm talking to you from my house in Zurich, where I live with my husband, our two children, and we have one on the way. I'm thoroughly into the third trimester now. I'm somewhere between 6 and 7 months pregnant and definitely feeling now a lot bigger. Let's leave it at that. Nothing too dramatic, but starting to affect my movements around the place. I have an awful lot to talk to you about this week. I wanted to podcast, to record an episode last week, as soon as I could after I got back from the Barcelona Knits Festival, which was fantastic, but it just wasn't possible. There was a lot of things that sort of caught up with us, and so I waited until I had time to talk properly about things, but it just sort of seems that it means that more and more things have accumulated. So I do have some admin up front. Hopefully it's all interesting and fun admin, and I'll try not to linger on it all too much. I will keep the chit chat about the festival towards the second half of the episode. So first piece of admin that I wanted to mention is that we had a giveaway on the last episode. This was for 2 skeins of worsted weight yarn, which had come back in a knit crate, which was sent to me. I haven't actually pulled out I had pulled out so many things that I forgot to actually pull out the yarn. But anyway, I have drawn for the giveaway, and the winner was, I believe your name on YouTube is Rachel Ravenclaw, but I know you from Instagram, and I think you're Ravenclaw Rachel there. So if you could just get in contact with me, probably via Instagram is best, but you can also message me on Ravelry if you prefer. I am Kingfisher Knits on Instagram, and I am Madeleine Windsor on Ravelry. So if you could message me, please, Rachel, with your address, then I will get that sent out to you in the post, those 2 skeins of yarn. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about the indie gift along. So this is something that I took part in last year. It is an event which takes place on Ravelry every single year from about the last week, including the last week of November, all the way up to the end of December. The idea is that it's a knit along, gift along, so typically with sort of projects that you can realistically get done in that time and that maybe you're going to be gifting to people at Christmas, although it's not obligatory that what you are making you are giving away. The point is that lots of designers, independent designers with self-published patterns on Ravelry, basically all apply to take part and all agree to have a 25% discount on up to 20 of their self-published patterns, which they have to basically put on sale for a sale period. Unfortunately, the sale period ends today, although it ends today midnight. This is November the 29th, Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully I will do my usual job of recording this and basically putting it straight up on YouTube. So there is a chance that if you're watching this as soon as it comes out and you didn't know about this, you can still go and benefit from the sale bundles. So there are over 6,000 patterns in the giant sale bundle. I will put down the links below, and the the coupon code is GIFTALONG2018, all written together, small letters for the Gift Along 2018 is in numbers. And I will put that all the info down there. And regardless, even if you didn't have chance to take part in the sale or you weren't interested, the CAL part of the Gift Along is that you knit any paid for pattern from any of the designers participating. So there are, I'm trying to remember now how many designers there are, what number, it was a lot, it's hundreds of designers. So again, you can find a list of participating designers in the Indie Gift Along Ravelry group, which I will also link down below. So maybe you can have a look, maybe you already have patterns, or you can still go buy their patterns at full price if you want to take part. And it's a lot of fun. There are various threads. It's divided into 8 different types of knits. So you have baby knits are separate from hats, which are separate from shawls, which are separate from sweaters. So you can join in there. They pull for random prizes throughout. Every single designer who takes part has contributed codes for one free download from their Ravelry store. There are also games going on, so there are game threads within there where you have to solve puzzles. And there's just an awful lot of chit chat, and it's a great place to get really good ideas. And I just find it very inspirational every single year. I remember from the first year I found out about it before I was able to take part as a designer. So I did want to mention that, and I have cast on, so far I have cast on one proper gal project that qualifies, but I have several that I would like to do. Okay, so that was the prime admin. I did also want to just say that today I announced a collaboration that has been in a long time in preparation. Well, the collaboration is finished now, which is that I was part of the Nora George Yarns Advent Calendar for 2018. So everyone who purchased one of her Advent calendars knew that included within it was a pattern. They were just given a Ravelry download code, which wouldn't be accessible until today. Today I activated the pattern online. For the first 2 weeks, it is only available to those who have purchased the Advent calendar, because that was part, I think that's only fitting. This was a pattern designed for the Advent calendar, which Tracy of Nora George came up with. So they can download it for now. So if you were one of the lucky few who purchased one of those, then you can now go and download that pattern with your code that you were provided with. And I will mention it again once it is available for general download. What we are not doing, while there are some test knitters who use their own stash yarn or own combinations to knit up the cowl, we are not showing the finished cowl in the Advent calendar yarn, because that would ruin the surprise of the yarn that you're meant to be opening each day. So that won't be shown until Christmas. But it's a great easy cowl project with the perfect amount of knitting per day, which allows you to have your colours play to their full extent while the knitting is easy. And there are 2 different options for the cowl. All the information is on the Ravelry pattern page, and given that I haven't got anything to show you about it right now, I'm not going to talk about that more. I will talk about that more when it goes on to general pattern release, so that you can see more in case you'd be interested in getting that pattern. And the other thing about it is that while of course it's designed for an Advent calendar, I actually thought about the design in terms that it will work not just if you have beautiful mini skeins, but it will also work to use like just 2 colours that you could basically alternate throughout the whole pattern, and it will still work. Okay, that is all of the admin for now. I also, I forgot, I did have another pattern release. It's funny how everything just comes together, and that was with Sweet Georgia. Sweet Georgia Yarns are in Canada. They are the company which I've definitely designed for the most. And I had a hat pattern in their Holidays with Sweet Georgia Volume 4 collection, might be Volume 3. Anyway, this year's Holidays with Sweet Georgia. It was a chunky hat pattern called Francie, knit in chunky weight yarn, and it had, I will try and put the picture of it in here. I'm just not saying try because I'm not capable, because I just feel like I might forget. But I will certainly put the link down below so that you can go and check out what that looks like. It's an excellent gift knit, super, super fast. Most of my testers knit it in a day or 2. So that's a great, very easy, but yet interesting and very wearable hat project. It's also definitely unisex. So I must mention that. Okay, now I would like to move on, and I usually start with whips, and I have quite a lot. I even have finished objects this week, so I really feel like there's an awful lot to get through. I'm just gonna do my best. I'll try not to dwell on things that I've talked about before too much. So the first whip that I wanted to show you was sort of my prime, I cast it on to be prime travel knitting. It's living in this bag which the lovely Vicky Bird of Vicky Bird Designs made for me. And I cast on the beautiful art yarn that I got from Twisted Limone. I think we're going to have a problem with blues today because it's a very overcast day. I have the window giving me as much light as I can, but I've also put on an overhead light, hence why you can see weird shadows around. And that is always the worst combination for blues, I find. But anyway, this is a gumball of self-striping yarn from Twisted Limone. This is the Art Yarn number 8 colour, and I cast this on before leaving for Barcelona Knits, so that whatever I had time to knit on, I brought a couple of projects with me, but I would always have something which would be super, super quick, easy to pull out and knit on. I couldn't decide exactly what I wanted to do, although I was sure I wanted to do toe-up socks. I'm not quite sure why. And I thought that I would do contrasting toes and heels and do afterthought heels. So I had to find a yarn that I thought would work. And I thought about doing something very contrasting, you know, just taking a black or a, I don't know, other simple solid colour. But I had this in my stash, which is not the same as exactly the same as any of the stripes in the yarn, but totally looks like it could be part of it. So I decided to go with this for the toes and heels. This is Lolo Did It in the blue tourmaline colourway on her, I think she calls it Everyday Sock, which is her 75-25 blend. So I did toe up. I used the Turkish cast on for the first time ever. It's something that I played with once when I'd seen it in a pattern, but I hadn't needed to do it. I just gone to look it up and played with it for a second. But it's the first time I did it and actually used it. It was great. I really, really like it, because with Judy's Magic Cast On, which I'm totally capable of doing, I always forget one detail and have to look it up. And the Turkish cast on, after I did it the first time, I didn't have to look at it again to do it the second time. Anyway, so I did toe up and I increased up to 56 stitches, and then I switched to the self-striping yarn. So then I knit to, I don't know, I think I've worked out that my heel will need to go either between these two stripes or half, I can't remember if it's in the middle of this stripe, in between the two stripes. So it's somewhere in this region my heel will have to go. So if I fold this in half, you can see that it's about, you know, the leg and cuff is almost the same length as the foot, which is kind of how I wanted them to be. I didn't change to contrast yarn for the ribbing. I did a, what's it called, garter rib or broken rib. So it's knit 2, purl 2 for one round, and then knit all the way around. One thing I did do was bind the top of this off 3 times, and I'm still not happy with it. This is one thing, I really quite like knitting top socks, but I find that Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off in my hands always flares, so I didn't even try and do it here. I did a different bind off, which I did just a few stitches and realised it wasn't stretchy enough. Already can't remember what I tried. This is very, very, very useful information. Anyway, and then I can't remember what this bind off is either, whether it was called the Russian bind off, or I remember it had some kind of name. Anyway, I'm still not happy with that either. I stopped for now. I stopped fiddling with it after I bound it off like 3 different times, and I went on and cast on the second sock. What I had actually done was, because I didn't want to bring this whole cake of yarn with me, but neither did I want to wind off a mini of it and then end up with a scrap that I didn't need, I had knit both of these toes before I left. And what you might also notice is I'm not knitting them 2 at a time. I knit all of this, and while I had the toe for this one ready on another pair of needles, I didn't start work on the sock, rest of the sock, until I finished this. I wanted to try this out because while I do love that I can do 2 at a time socks, and I always thought that I would never finish a pair of socks unless I did 2 at a time. I mean, I've done it for pattern socks, and indeed they took forever, but they were also pattern socks. I really wanted this to be super, super, super easy travel knitting that I could pull out, not even think about it, immediately start working and knitting, and not even have to think about, am I all set up with my yarn, and switching from, you know, one little ball of yarn to the next to as you go around and around with 2 at a time. And I have to say it went really fast. So at least this time around, that was the right call. You will also maybe notice I'm not trying to make them match. I really didn't want to try. I didn't want to waste any yarn. I may have cut off a tiny bit just so that I was starting again at the beginning of a stripe down here, rather than having a little bit left of a stripe from the bind off up here, but not even sure I did that. Maybe a tiny bit. So they're not going to be matching, but again, this is a 10, is it 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is a 12 striping skein of yarn, and I really didn't think they needed to be matching, personally. I wanted to see what they would look like, not matching. And I haven't weighed this, but I definitely am going to have plenty of yarn left over, so I will have some to make another pair of socks, probably a short pair of socks. Yeah, I'm knitting this on my 2.25 Chiagoo mini twists. I don't feel like I ever want to use another sock. Sock needle for Magic Loop. It has the best cable. They are the perfect amount of pointiness for me for socks, and metal and slidey, but not crazy slidey. One thing I can comment on here is that I used, when I knit my second toe, so that it would be ready, I knit it on these needles, which are the Likke Driftwood needles. This is a fixed circular, which I picked up when I was in America. And so the same 2.25, so it's my first time using them. Of course, this is also using a small needle size, so it's not that everything is transferable, let's say, from small needles from one brand to their bigger or sort of more mid-range, I would say, needles. You often find that they behave differently because they're much, much thinner. These, okay, of course they're not as slippery as metal. They are more slippery than some wood needles, and I've heard that from people, and I think that's why a lot of people quite like them. They had good joins, but the needles actually bend while I was knitting with them, and I'm not a tight knitter. And I didn't feel like they were going to break. There was just flexibility to that, which maybe that's very, very desirable for some people. I know some people say they like knitting with wood because it melds to your hands in a way. It certainly isn't fighting your hands like the metal can, which is so stiff. It felt odd to me. So I still need to knit a bit more with this, like not just a toe. But I did want to mention that I was surprised quite how, I know I'm making noise here, sorry, but I'm just going to pull them out. I was surprised quite how flexible they were when I was knitting with them. So you can see there, they bend very, very easily. And I have admittedly never used wooden sock needles. So the smallest wooden needles I have are 3mm needles. I didn't have any wooden needles smaller than 3mm before these. So maybe that's common. And just wanted to mention it. And I will get back to you if I have any more things to say about any other needle discoveries. Okay, stop making noise. So I feel like after saying I'm not going to talk for very long about things, I've spoken for a very long time about vanilla socks. Anyway, got a lot of work done on those. They will get finished when they're finished. They are there to be my easy stockinette project. The other project that I knit on mostly while I was away, which is actually, I knit on it when I was on the plane, is I finished my first Selby mitten. So which hand is this for? This is my left hand apparently. So I just get that on. It hasn't been blocked yet, so I think there'll be a few things to even out. I also haven't made an attempt yet to close. I mean, there's not holes there at the joint. This is the first time oh dear, can't seem to show you that. It's the first time I'm doing this type of thumb construction, as you find on the Selby mittens. But when I look closely here, I can see that there's a couple of little holes. So I will just, when I weave in my end, make that a little bit neater, but I'm relatively happy with it. This project, if you remember, I have found it really tricky when I got started, as I was doing Magic Loop and, you know, 2 colour work on Magic Loop with pretty rustic yarn that sort of sticks to itself. So the 2 different strands, which I prefer to hold in one hand, was kind of sticking to each other, and I was finding it a bit tricky, especially with the sort of having to adjust a bit my tension, and then by the time I'd got, you know, set up, I had to switch needles for the Magic Loop. I got into much more of a rhythm of it by the time I got up here. Probably maybe I had a few more stitches, and I always felt like I could get into a good rhythm. It's not blocked yet, but the tension here on this main part, I'm pretty happy with. I think the pattern looks good. It's a bit funky around the edges here, you can see. like especially here. Things got a bit funky when I started doing the decreases. Here's not too bad, but I kind of think this is the kind of bit stuff that will probably even out a bit with blocking. I'm pretty happy with how the palm then turned out, but you can see like down here it looks like the white isn't as dominant, and I don't know what happened there because I was always holding the white dominant, as you can tell from the other side where it still looks quite even. You can also see that I messed up the pattern here. I was on the plane, and yeah, it should look always like this, sort of making these diamonds here. But anyway, I also discovered at the last, after I bound off, that I missed one stitch, white stitch here. So I will probably duplicate stitch that in with the end, which is anyway here from finishing the thumb. But otherwise I think it looks lovely, and I again messed up the pattern here on the inside on the thumb in exactly the same way as I messed it up down here. Not really sure what I was doing, but it doesn't look terrible, and I really don't mind. But yeah, it felt like quite an accomplishment to get this finished, and I would love to get the other mitten finished this year, but I haven't cast it on yet. This yarn, I've said it a million times, feels like, but it is the Kate Davies yarn. It is the Buachaille or the Buachaille in the ptarmigan and Isla colourways. This is a sort of DK weight woolen spun yarn, 110 meters and 50 grams, non-superwash. Living in a project bag made by myself, and now on the floor. Okay, next whip. I have finished the body on my Serafina top. This is the Serafina top by the incredibly talented Irmian design, who is Irina Anikeva. I always feel like I don't pronounce her surname properly, so that's why I say Irmian or Irmian design also. Just to remember, this is the top up here, and I've now finished the body. The body was finished with a twisted rib. Let me show it like this. Easier. And I did my first ever, what is called classically called, the tubular bind off. I've done tubular bind offs before. I do the Italian bind off, which is also a sewn bind off, when I'm using 2-color brioche, or 1-color brioche for that matter. Which I think is slightly different. I didn't actually bother studying it when I was doing it, how different the result is. The process is very different for this one, because this is the one where you slip all of your purl stitches onto a second needle going all the way around, so then you end up with all your knit stitches on one needle, one circular needle, all your purl stitches on the other circular needle, and then you're Kitchener stitching those together, so you end up with a perfect edge. Gosh, it took a long time, and oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. And this is the biggest circumference, and I almost didn't do it here, not because I didn't think it was important or was going to be beautiful or worth it, but because I was like, then, once I've done it here, I have to do it when I do the neckband and the arm openings. But there's fewer stitches there, and that's where it's even more important because you really notice it. So I just thought, go for it. The pattern says, it's optional. Bind off your stitches if you like, use a tubular bind off. I just think it's so beautiful. And I'm not going to say, I know a lot of people say once they've started doing tubular cast-ons, bind offs, that they're always going to do it. I don't know that I'm always going to do it, but it just looks so beautiful. So this top I am knitting out of a merino cable, which is a sort of sport weight yarn. It's from Siddy Spint. You'll find all the details down below in the description box. And yeah, I'm using the undyed colourway here for these lace panels on the shoulder. I'm going to use that also for the neckband and the sort of little sleeve cuffs. And this colourway, this beautiful tonal grey, is the Stein colour, which is German for stone. So we're only going on that quickly because last time I showed it to you, I think I was already on the twisted rib. So all I really did was finish that off and do the tubular bind off. One big project that I pulled out, again, is my Recoleta cardigan. This is by Joachim Locatelli. It's beautiful. I'm knitting this out of, here's my only full ball or skein of yarn left. This is the Traveller Aran base from the Plucky Knitter. It has now been discontinued, but I think they still have their sport weight of this blend. It is 65% superfine superwash, extra fine superwash merino, 20% mulberry silk and 15% yak. This is the Wanderlust colourway, which is a beautiful, deep, fairly dark, but also warm grey. There's a brownish tone to it for sure. Not by eye, but if you know about colour, let's say a bit, you know that it's more of a brownish grey. So I'm going to sit back a little bit so that I can show it off to you. I already have picked up for one of the sleeves. The sleeves are just in stockinette stitch. So I've got them on the sleeve now, on the needles now, so that will be my kind of priority easy knitting. I also kind of am prioritizing finishing this because it's a cardigan, and while I am still wearing my sweaters, and of course they get cropped off because now I have my belly, they're kind of getting to the point now where most of the sweaters, because I don't tend to knit sweaters with a lot of positive ease, I don't want to keep wearing them, I don't want to stretch them out, So it would be nice to still have a bit of knitwear that I can wear, and this is a lovely cardigan, which is, it's an open cardigan, but it's got a lot of fabric in the front with the lace panels. So I'm just going to show you the back first. I hope that you can see that nicely. Let me get that yarn out of your view there. The lace patterning on this is just beautiful, and it goes all the way down. Then the back lace panel does not go all the way to the bottom. You switch to ribbing, 1x1 ribbing. Then there were these panels underneath the arms, which were always worked in stockinette stitch, and the front panels though, so what's called the collar, because it starts all the way up here at the back of the back, that's the collar, which then runs all the way down the front of the garment. These you carried on the lace all the way down. So if I pick that up, I always find showing this off really difficult. You can see that the lace there goes all the way to the bottom. So obviously it's not blocked yet, but it's totally, totally beautiful. And I'm loving it very, very much. I believe that I'm working on 4.5mm needles. I don't remember that right now, and I don't have a needle gauge to hand, but I will link my project page where all the information is. I also calculated that I should just about have enough yarn with the 5 skeins that I bought for this project. I do actually have a 6th skein of the same colourway in my stash, but I bought that before. To my eye, it doesn't look any different, so I'm glad that I have it, so that if in a case of emergency I think I'm not going to get to the end of it, I will have something that I can use to finish off, you know, the cuffs or what have you. I would like this to be, you know, a nice full length sleeve, so fingers crossed that we can get there. So I'm really, really happy to have pulled that out again, and now all the lace is done, all the charts is done, it's just sleeves, and I think I've never been happier to get sleeves, not because this was very complicated, it was not, it's just it was dark yarn, there were different charts for the back and for the collar, and given that most of my knitting time recently is in the evenings, anyway, not with natural light, I just always felt like it was taking me longer for each row pair than it would have done if I was just sitting there knitting on it in the morning, but I never had the time to knit on it in the morning. So I'm just glad that now we're at the point where I can just knit the sleeves and it will be done. So I'm just going to plonk that over there. On to the next whip. This is getting ridiculous. I showed to you when I first started out working on this design, which is working with yarn from Chile Knits, who is Connie, who I got to see in Barcelona, which was really, really lovely. I'm working with 3 different colours of her cuddly sock. Her cuddly sock base is her fingering weight base, which is 85% merino, superwash merino, 15% nylon, and it's so, so soft. So I'm working with these 3 colours. This is Masquerade Light, this is Sound of Silence, and this is Imagination. and I am doing a short-sleeved top design, and I have finished the body. So this is also a pretty easy point to show it to you. There's very little left to do on this because it's going to have, it's short-sleeved and I'm not really knitting a lot more, basically. I still have 2 ideas of the sleeves. I kind of feel bad that I haven't made like a solid decision there. So I'm not going to commit and tell you what I'm doing there. But I think when I showed this to you before, I was still on the yoke and it was all bunched up. So it starts off up here. It's got a nice round neck with some short rows worked in there to bring up the back, and it's worked in twisted rib. Beautiful twisted rib there. Then it uses circular yoke shaping to shape it all out here. And at the fullest part of the yoke, we have this design here, which is very simple. It features the first sort of the bands you see on the top and bottom there are just worked with simple slip stitches, just with the yarn held in front. And all of that texture there are just 1/1 cables, which I don't work with a cable needle. They're also called twisted travelling stitches. So you don't even, there's a quite easy technique to work with them, let's say, and I will explain that in my pattern, of course. So then after I separated for the sleeves, I switched to the other 2 colours, and then those are just striped in 2-row stripes down the body. I have put in, some slight waist shaping. That is of course optional, but I just love how these 2 colours play together. Obviously here I've gone for quite a contrast, like a colour block between the top and the bottom here, which is totally optional. I mean, this is still a fairly variegated yarn, but I can tell you that when you look at it, you can still clearly see, I mean, it's a tonal yarn, but there's a lot going on even in this tonal yarn with speckles and the like, and you can still see this stitch pattern very clearly when you look at it. It's really, really beautiful when you look at it by eye. And then if you're someone who's not so much up for that big contrast or shift in colour, then down here you can have picked 2 other skeins that are totally different from what I've gone for, you know what I mean? Or you can knit the whole thing in 1 colour. The idea here was to pick, to be able to do things with, depending on your size, obviously just 1 or 2 skeins of each colourway to be able to achieve the garment. And what I've done is I finished this off with 2 colour brioche. I will also write that as optional. I've done it 2 colour brioche, which I still thought was fun because I still liked how you could see the second colour here through in the sort of the pearl columns of the brioche. You could do it all in 1 colour brioche if you wanted, or you could just choose 1 colour and do a 1/1 rib. And here I used my favourite Italian bind off, sewn bind off, which again gives you a beautiful tubular edge there to the edge of the project. I actually did the bind off in the grey. I just wanted to see how it looked. I don't think it made any difference really. So that's why maybe when you look at it you can see more clearly the bind off. If I'd done it in the imagination colour, the turquoisey colour, you probably would have seen it a bit less. It's not blocked yet, but it still has beautiful, beautiful drape to it. So I will just be finishing off the sleeves on this very soon. And yeah, what I need to do still is properly, I've got sketched out my ideas, but I need to properly grade this up for different sizes and then properly write the pattern. So far what I did was I just laid out the whole pattern just for my size, which seemed to make sense to me. Just gonna take a sip of my tea because I've been talking a lot. So much knitting, and this I've been knitting on my higher needles. I think I used a 2.75mm for the ribbing and for the brioche because brioche has a much looser gauge, while I used a 3.25 or 3.5 even for all the rest. That's living in my beloved little bobbins bag. Okay, I only have 1 more whip to share. But I do want to share it because I have been working on it and it's totally relevant which is the project which I've cast on for the gal. So I decided I have this pattern from Faye Kennington, who is also Uki or Uke Knits, Uki. It's UKEE is what she is on Instagram. She is a very talented designer. She has a lot of designs and she's taking part as a designer and probably also as a knitter in the Indie Gift Along. And she has several beautiful patterns, and I've been lucky enough to even tech edit a couple of her hat patterns, and this was one of them. This is the Cathedral Grove pattern. And I wanted to knit it ever since I first saw it. And I mean, I'm here so far. I've done the ribbing. It's a 3-colour project. She has 1 colour for the ribbing, 1 colour to be the sort of background of your colour work, and 1 colour to be the contrast of your colour work. I think in her sample, she had like a beautiful rich mustard colour, then a pretty dark, maybe even black for the background here, and then she had white or cream, like I have here. And this actually eventually forms kind of tree design. But what I'm using here is some yarn that I got in Barcelona Knits, that I did a class, a brioche class, which I will talk briefly about. And we were given 2 50-gram already round cakes of Malabriga Rios in 2 colours, which, given it was a 2-colour brioche class, these colours really didn't have enough contrast. It's not that you could not do 2-colour brioche with them, and not that it wouldn't be beautiful, but certainly for a class which was with Nancy Marchant, and she's teaching kind of a complicated technique, this was not ideal. We were not best impressed. Bless them. Malabriga yarn is beautiful. I have nothing bad to say against them, but I think at one point Nancy was like, it would have been good if they hadn't given us red and darker red. I mean, mine here has quite a lot of lighter, orangey, autumnal, greenish colours in it. Some people had ones with more blue, and some people had ones which were even more red than this, always against this beautiful cranberry red. So anyway, beautiful yarn, still very glad to have it, and I thought it would work beautifully in this hat. I had to find a contrast to go with it. I really didn't want to go buying yarn. So what I decided to do, Malabriga Rios is a worsted weight yarn, which is what the pattern calls for. But I thought I could get away with using this DK weight yarn. This is from West Yorkshire Spinners. It's a sock yarn. It's their Air Valley DK. This might be called cream, but I think it's just their natural colour. So it's a 75-25 wool nylon blend, whereas the Rios is 100% superwash merino. This is superwash, and it is finer. So we'll see how well it turns out. It's being held as the dominant colour, so it should have the fatter stitches. It's not quite having the full effect that it would, because the yarn is thinner, so it does get a bit overwhelmed. But I think it's working out. I mean, there you can see the white quite clearly, or the cream. Oops, let's not drop stitches off the end here. Anyway, I worked the ribbing on 4mm needles. I am now on 4.5 for the colour work, and I just think it's beautiful. This might be a gift, it might not, but I mean, I knit the rib in one evening, and I've knit this in a couple of very short sittings. So, and it is living, because it is now the season, in my only Christmassy project bag. This was made for me by the lovely Vicky Bird, or Vicky Bird Designs. She sent it to me last year after the Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted, and I'd asked for project bags or a project bag, and she whipped one up and sent it to me as a surprise, and she made it Christmas themed, which is perfect because I don't have a Christmas bag. So this is my Christmas bag, and it seemed the right project at the right place to store my gift along project. I have actually knit other things in this time, but I'm not even going to show them to you because that's a ridiculous amount. Okay, I have 2 finished objects to talk about, and it kind of feels crazy now that I've talked to you about so much, and I also have yarn in front of me from Barcelona Knits. Anyway, I think what I'm going to do is I'm only going to talk about one FO. I'm going to save the other one because it was a design, and I want to be able to talk about it a little bit and explain my design, but I feel like I'm going to keep you here too long, and I don't want to rush through it. So we'll put that one to one side and I'll talk about it next time. But I'll show you my other FO, which are my Hedgehog Fibres socks. I'm afraid they're looking a bit baggy on the blockers because I have worn them, and then I thought, oh, I should show them on the podcast. So, and I could have just washed them again, but frankly I didn't. So I've put them on the blockers to show them to you, but they have been worn, sorry. They're lovely and I really, really love them, is the main take-home message of these socks. This is the Hedgehog Fibres Twist Sock base, which is their, I don't think it's 75-25 BFL nylon, I think it's 80-20 or 85-15. I don't have the tag or anything around. I think someone told me that this yarn has been discontinued, which is a shame because as far as I'm concerned, this is the sock yarn which Hedgehog Fibres make, because they have Hedgehog Fibres Sock, which is I think a 90-10 merino nylon blend, and I felt that yarn and I personally wouldn't enjoy making socks with it because it's very fine, very, very thin yarn. And I've heard from many people that it doesn't hold up very well because while you can totally make socks without nylon, if the yarn is also very thin. Anyway, so I don't know if they have replaced this with some other base which is good for socks, or Hedgehog Fibres have just decided that they are not so much there for the sock knitter. I don't know, because they have beautiful yarn. And I have another pair of socks in the same base and I love it. Anyway, this is the Seaspray colourway, which was a club colourway, which means it's not repeatable. I absolutely love making these. I knit them cuff down. They have a 2x1 rib, and then I've done sort of like a mini heel flap. I've done a garter stitch short row heel, and then the little gusset, and I've just done a sort of normal, is it a rounded toe or a wedge toe, this one? Looks like a wedge toe to me. I love them. They feel great on. I think they're about 56 stitches for the main bits here. I had to change the stitch count here because 56 doesn't work on a 2x1 rib, but I sent already some of the leftover yarn to a friend because she wanted a mini of it, and I have a little bit left to either give to somebody else or use in some way or other. Very much in love with my new socks, and that's why I had already worn them. Okay, I think that's enough for the projects. I am not going to ramble on a lot about Barcelona knits, although I did have a wonderful time. What I will say is that it was my first time ever traveling for a yarn festival, and really what I would call properly attending one. I have been to one before here in Zurich, but I popped in for all of 2 hours and I had a chat with a friend, and I did go around and talk to vendors, and I don't even remember if I bought anything. And that wasn't, it just didn't feel the same because I wasn't sort of traveling for it and meeting up with a bunch of people. And anyway, this time I was going to the festival, I was going to the full 2 days, I was attending a class. And yes, I was traveling on my own, but I knew there were people there who I could go bother, and then there were other people that I wanted to meet, and I did get to meet, and it was really, really wonderful experience. I know everyone recommends, if you can go to one of these things, go for it. And that's what I did. I had the chance to go, and I took it, and I booked things, and I'm so glad that I did. The main highlights, people-wise, were that I finally got to meet Connie of Chile Knits in person. She was crazy busy, bless her, because she had a booth, and I was only there for those 2 days, but she was manning her booth. But I did go over for various amounts of cuddles, and we did chat. But I really hope that I will get more time to see you in the future, Connie, because you are lovely. I got to see Liz from Trade Liz again. I met her before at the Zurich Yarn Festival or the Swiss Wool Festival in the past. And it was really nice to see her, and she let me dump my bags at her booth and things and go sit down when I wanted to have a rest, and Connie was of course offering the same. But it was just really nice and relaxing to see her. Obviously she also had a booth, and she was very, very busy. And then I knew of and wanted to meet and knew that she would be attending a lady called Julie. Many of people know her because she's Evie and Lily on Instagram, and people know her because of her connection with Jorge Locatelli. So she works for Jorge, having been a test knitter for her for a long time. Anyway, and I've always commented on her pictures, and I knew she was going to be there, so I said, I'm going to pop up and see you if I can. and she was really lovely, and I went to see her and chat with her, and basically ended up hanging out with her and friends of hers who I met, including Hannah from Finland, are the ones I spent most of the time with for the rest of the festival. And it was just so nice just to be, what's the word, sort of, you know, we'd never met before, and you're just immediately sort of swept up and come along with us, and we'll hang out, and everything is natural and relaxed, and it was really a lovely experience. I also got to meet Grace from Babel's Travelling Yarns. I saw her standing and I was like, "Hi, Grace," and she had no idea who I was. Well, then she recognised my name, I think, when I said that I was Kingfisher Knits. But I basically just attacked her, and then we had lunch both days of the festival, which was really, really nice. She's really lovely person to talk to, as is clear from her podcast. As I said, she has Babel's Travelling Yarns, I think is her company, and the Babel's Travelling Yarns podcast. Mixtures of words often baffle me, but it was really lovely to see Grace, and it's another person I would like to see another time. And anyway, hanging out especially with Julie and Hannah, I then also got to meet the lovely ladies who have Yarn Over Berlin, the yarn store in Berlin, and who also organise, is it Berlin Knits Festival, I think it was, so Steffi and Marion. That was really lovely, and they were really lovely people. Everyone seems to be, but they really were. And there was a bunch of Portuguese knitters. Right now I can only remember the name of one of them, she was called Maria, and she was lovely. And I don't really want to keep, you don't want to mention all the names, but I also want to mention the people who I spent like the most time with. And I did get to meet also a bunch of yarn companies who I knew of before. I went along to La Bien-Aimée, so I spoke to Amy a little bit, and I also got to meet Vera Valamaki, I got to meet Jorge Locatelli, and I got to meet Nancy Marchant because I took a class with her, and they were all really lovely people, and it was just a lovely experience. I also got to meet some people who I bought yarn from, and I will just show you briefly that now. So what I did do was, I think my first yarn purchase was this, and this is from a yarn company which I had heard of, but I don't think I followed them on Instagram before, and I hadn't really it's not that I heard of them and gone, oh, we'll check them out. I just clocked their name and moved on. But wow, they have amazing yarn. So this is Norn Yarn. They're from Norway. Tuva is the dyer. And they have the most amazing colours. It was not all, but most of it is jewel toned. And this base in particular just caught my eye. It is a single ply merino silk yak blend. So obviously the yak would have had some dark grey to it. That's a pretty accurate representation of the colour. So it's 120 grams, 480 meters. This is the Daradal, oh dear, I didn't practice the pronunciation before. It's the Daradal Yod. I should have asked how to pronounce it, didn't even occur to me. There we go. Colourway. And what I did was get 2 skeins of the single ply merino silk yak and 1 skein of the mohair silk lace weight, because this will be enough for an Elton cardigan, which is a lovely pattern by Jorge Locatelli. Yeah, and so I got them all in the same colourway. There were lots of Elton cardigans, to be honest, at the festival, and the cardigan is designed to use, you choose the same colourway in your fingering weight yarn and your lace weight yarn, mohair silk, but I also saw many where people had done slightly different colours, maybe still the same sort of colour, but one slightly darker, one lighter. I don't think I saw any which were totally contrasting, but I just totally fell in love with this colour, and I think that it's going to be beautiful. So yeah, it's a bit tricky to grab the colour, but this one here is how that's showing. That's pretty accurate right now. It's showing this one a bit too light for some reason and this one a bit too dark. So I was very happy to pick that up, although it was not remotely a planned purchase. I also know it's pretty tricky to get hold of yarn from them because it comes from Norway and I think the shipping is pretty expensive, so I was really happy to get that. Then I went to pick up some yarn. So I knew that we were meant to be given yarn in the brioche class from Nancy Marchand, but I wasn't sure if I was also meant to have some brioche product on the needles, because basically they opened up an extra space or two for this class like just the week before, so I had just signed up for it and I hadn't been sent any information about homework, and so I thought, well, I'll grab some yarn, worsted weight or what have you, contrasting, just so that if I do need yarn, I've got it. And I'm very glad I did, because as you can see, the yarn that they provided for the class would have been really difficult to work with. So what I just decided to do, because I had also seen this when I was checking out the vendors before going into the marketplace, I had seen these people. I've ripped both of the tags. Oh dear. D-Lana. So it's 100% merino, and it's, I mean, is it a single ply? Would you call that? I think it is still plied, but anyway, it's fairly sort of loose, super squishy, non-superwash merino yarn, you know, very, very airy and squishy. And I picked up, it's undyed as well. This is their natural, so I think they showed me they have 5 shades. So they have, this is the natural, the lightest natural shade they have, and then they have quite a dark sheep shade, and then all the ones in between are blends of those two. So I think there's one between these two colours, and then there's a slightly darker one, and then there's the darkest. Anyway, I picked up 2 balls of this. They're so squishy and so beautiful. They had a beautiful baby sweater knit up there and other samples, but I just went to grab this just so I could try it out and I would have something for my brioche class, and this is the yarn I ended up using for the swatch in the brioche class. Ah, sheepy. So I'm glad to have picked up that, and gosh, it's warm. Don't think I've ever held merino yarn that was that warm before. Then I very much was drawn to the La Bien-Aimée booth. It's one of those things where it's it's a company which has hypes around it. There's a lot of people are very interested and very hot about their yarn. They're very popular. They go to a lot of festivals, admittedly, good on them, so people can go and see their yarn. And their, you know, updates sell out, and they have their yarn store, so you can go see them in Paris. I just knew, well, one day I would like to get hold of their yarn. I was always kind of holding off and wanting to see it for myself before ordering it. So then I was in Barcelona, they were there, I could see all the yarn, I could touch it all. Their single ply merino is so stunning. I mean, all her dye work is very, very beautiful. And as many people know, dye shows up amazingly on superwash merino, and especially single ply. But I just, as much as I have actually loved working with single ply merino, and I've done some projects with it, and I have more ideas to use up, that I have that in my stash, not from her admittedly, but I was not going to let myself buy that unless I was totally blown away by some particular colour or project that I could do. So I immediately gravitated towards the sport weight yarn, and after some deliberation, I think I visited them 3 times and I didn't buy the yarn until Sunday, which did mean one of the options that I had kind of penned out in my head there weren't enough skeins left for it to be worth buying it, because I didn't want 1 skein, I wanted a sweater's quantity. So I needed 4 skeins of their merino sport base, and 4 skeins is what I got. And as I said, this colour is not going to show up properly with this light, and it's so annoying. It's getting it. You're losing all of the subtleties. No, it's totally ruined. So for this, you're going to have to go look at my Instagram page where you can see the colour way, way, way better. But it's beautiful, and I just love this yarn. As I said, I wasn't going to buy yarn from La Bien-Aimée just because it was La Bien-Aimée. I picked it up immediately. It is more like a fingering weight, to be honest, although it's 350 meters. It's 350 meters for 100 grams. No, 325. But it's very high twist. And I think it's beautiful, and it's going to have amazing stitch definition. This colourway is the Vesper Graffiti. It's a beautiful turquoise. There are lighter parts, there are darker parts, there are speckles, and those speckles are various shades of teal and green and deep ocean blue, and you're just not seeing it here, and that's really, really bothering me. But anyway, I have a couple of photos on my Instagram which show it much, much better. And yes, I bought this without a specific project in mind. It will be a garment, it will be for me. But I checked up before buying a few different sport weight patterns, including a couple designed for, including a couple which were designed for this yarn in particular. And I knew that for the kind of size and fit of garment that I would like, 4 skeins would be fine. So there is the Winterfell Cardigan, which is a beautiful cardigan designed for this base. There is also the Icy Spring sweater by Recoleta, which is designed in a different, not in La Bien-Aimée yarn, but in the same, again in a sport weight yarn. Again, I would need, I have enough yardage here for the size that I would want to knit. So, and I looked up another couple of patterns that I don't remember off the top of my head now, and on all of them, this yardage would give me enough to make the size I was interested in. So it still remains a little bit to be seen. I probably will swatch with it and have a look at the gauges of those patterns and see if I'm happy with that and this yarn, and then decide from there. But I love this yarn colour so much. So that was my La Bien-Aimée haul. Okay, and the final yarn that I brought back, I will also say I did also go to the lovely Maggie of Textile Garden. I'd been told that I had to check her out, that she had buttons, and my does she have buttons. So she is a button booth, although she did have some beautiful shawl pins as well, possibly some other little bits and bobs, but it was vast majority buttons. So many buttons, so beautiful. I could have bought so many, but I'm terrible at, I'm not good at buying buttons even when I know what something's for, and I'm terrible at buying buttons and then using them and thinking that will be the right kind of button. So I held off. I know I can order from her. She's in the UK, I think she's in Brighton or nearby. But I did buy 2 sets of buttons. I haven't got them here because I can't find them, but as I had bought this yarn, I bought the buttons that I would need for the Elton to go with that yarn. And then those same buttons that I like, which have the sort of burgundy-ish hint to them, she had the same ones in a teal colour, so I got the same number of those 2, thinking that if I do make a cardigan with the La Bien-Aimée yarn, I can use them there. And even if I don't, I love those buttons so much, and they have teal in them, which is my favourite. I was very happy to buy them and have them. So the final bit of yarny goodness that came home with me is yarn from the Little Grey Sheep. I have always wanted to see the Little Grey Sheep yarn. I first remember hearing about them probably on some podcast. Specifically, I can remember Eli of Skeindeer talking about the Little Grey Sheep, and I can then remember seeing their interview on the Fruity Knitting podcast. I went over to the booth, and it was all beautiful, and I immediately started chatting with Emma, who owns the Little Grey Sheep. And it was really inspirational speaking to her, and I spoke to her several times throughout the weekend. She's another highlight of people that I met throughout the trip. And I don't want to babble on too much here, but Emma, you are lovely. Not that you're watching this, but really, really lovely. I so enjoy chatting with her about lots of different things, not just yarn and knitting. And I came away with 5 mini skeins, which we would like to do a collaboration for. So I will come up with a small accessory pattern. I'm thinking it might be a hat, but I'm much more thinking mitts or mittens at the moment, just because that's what's speaking to me. And so I picked out 5 skeins from her mini skein range. So this is her, make sure I get the thing, they call, yeah, the Stein Fine Wool. Yeah, this is her Stein Fine Wool base. And she just has the most lovely display. So I picked up these 5 skeins. So each one is 20 grams for 65 meters. That it is a clearly, non-superwash, 100% wool yarn. Here it says British mini skeins sheared by Susie. I met Susie, who's the shepherdess. She was there too. Washed in Yorkshire, spun in Devon. So I'm guessing John Arbon, but I don't actually know that. We didn't talk about him. And hand dyed on the farm by Emma. So Emma herself, who also owns the farm, dyes the yarn. So I picked these 5 because I was having an idea which based on having kind of this little gradient here and then these two guys to pop up against it. We will see how that works out. But I think this, I don't know, these are so beautiful. I feel like there are so many beautiful things you could do with this yarn. And it's just beautiful. I mean, they had a couple of samples there, especially of sweaters, yoked colourwork sweaters, which were absolutely to die for. So I'm very, very much hoping to see Emma again soon in the future, and thrilled to be working with her beautiful yarn. I think that's enough for now. I have a couple of other bits of stash which arrived, but I'm not going to overload you now. You'll see them when I work on them or when I decide to pull them out to show you. I want to say I also picked up some needle tips for my higher interchangeable set, because I have a higher sharp interchangeable set and I do love the sharp needles, but they're not always the best. And especially working with more rustic yarns, they were driving me crazy, to be honest. But at the same time, I didn't always want to use the wooden needles, so I picked up some more needle tips in the main sizes that I use, but of the higher steels, which is the less pointy tip. So I wanted to just mention that in case anyone else had the same experience as me and was frustrated. It's worth trying out. If you still love your super slick metal needles, it's worth trying out the higher steel as well. It's by no means a blunt needle, it's just not as sharp, and it's easier for me with these more rustic yarns. And the final thing I wanted to say is that the very naughty Tracy of Nora George Yarns sent me one of her 12 Days of Christmas packs. So she did an advent calendar, which was a pre-order, which went out ages ago, which was for 24 of her 20-gram mini skeins. And then she did another little release a little while back, which is for 12 10-gram mini skeins and 12 chocolates. So in here, in this bigger bag, there are chocolates. So the idea is one day you have your little skein of yarn and the other day you have a chocolate. So you've got 12 chocolates, 12 10-gram mini skeins. You're very, very sweet, Tracy. I love you. Thank you very much. I've never had a yarn advent calendar. Quite excited to have one, to be honest. And not just be making advent calendars for the kids, which is what I do every year. I have one of my own, which is a thrill. Okay, I have chatted along for ages and ages. You will find show notes eventually below this video. It might go up without show notes in the first instance, but I will put them in. And you will also find the links there of everywhere you can find me. I forget every time to say thank you so much for coming back and watching me again if you're a returning viewer. If you're new and checking me out for the first time, well, you haven't made it all the way to the end here, I'm sure. But if you did, wow, well done, and thank you so much. They're not normally quite this long. And yeah, it's just been a really wonderful past couple of weeks in my life, and I'm really happy to have finally taken the time to sit down and share some of that with you. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all geared up and ready for the Advent season, should that be something that interests you. It certainly interests me. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Bye.